your client check-in process is outdated. And you notice it because your clients are tired of it. They have done it multiple times with other coaches and they have noticed it doesn't really work for them. But for you, it's super frustrating because you need some kind of data to base your coaching decision on. So you're in this weird situation. Your clients don't want to do it, but you really need to do it. So how can we approach client check-ins in a different way, in a new way to solve these problems and actually get our clients the breakthroughs that they need to make progress? This is what we're going to talk about today, and I'm super excited to have Laura here. When did you first notice that the old way, the classic way of Facebook Lives, of client check-ins are not really working for you? And how did you develop some of these new solutions?
Robin, it was really early on in my career. And I think what I noticed the most was that there was just this constant friction point between what I felt like I needed from my client and what they were able to offer me every single week. And I remember getting certified, I'm sure you do as well. And the check-in process is just one of those things that we just have to do. It's a part of the process. It's a part of the journey. And we basically all use the same regurgitated check-in form because it's just been passed down, right? Like someone created it at some point and everyone's questions are just the same forever and ever. Amen. But what I started to notice as a coach really early on was that a lot of the details, a lot of the information I was asking from my client, I didn't actually really even use inside of this session. It was more like I was collecting all of this information and filing it away in their folder and then not really touching it. And so I started to question, okay, why am I asking these questions? What am I really getting out of this? And inside of that discovery, kind of what I realized is that I'm making this whole process about me. I am making the whole check-in process about how I can make it more comfortable for me to show up on that coaching call every week. Am I getting the information that I need? Do I have the reports that I need in order to show up prepared with an action plan, with a list of questions, with an objective? And so now when I'm working with my students, this is such a common thread because I feel like it's very indoctrinated into us that this
Mm.
is how we're supposed to use the check-in form. So a conversation I like to have with them is first and foremost, why are you even getting them to check in? What is it for? And getting them to realize that, okay, I actually am using this as a way to feel comfortable instead of using it as a way to empower. And
Mhm,
so
mhm.
that's the distinction I would really like to make today is making the shift away from using the check-in form as just a tool for us to feel good versus how can we actually flip it on its head and use it as an access point into developing self-trust with our clients, getting them to reach deep within themselves and feel intrinsically driven by it instead of it just being a box that they need to check every week to make us happy and for them to feel like they're doing a good job. I'm not sure if you've had a very similar experience, but this is just so common in the coaches that I come across.
Yeah, and what the word that jumped to mind when you talked about this was being coach-centered versus client-centered. And the
Right.
check-ins are very often the old ways of doing check-ins coach-centered. So give me how you sleep, how much you sleep, how much you drink, how is your consistency, how is your poop, whatever, and give me
Right.
all the information because I want to be prepared for the coaching session. I want to make sure that I can give as much information as possible. And this again is this, especially when you're early on, this, oh, I'm not sure what to do. And I want to make sure that I can actually say something in the conversation instead of being just comfortable with creating white space for clients to actually think through. And when I watched your workshop around client check-ins, one of the things that really stood out for me was the idea of over highlighting wins. and what the problem with that is. Can you explain this a little bit more to us?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first, I'd love to preface it just by saying that it's very natural when a client checks in with something positive that we want to highlight it and pull it out and celebrate it because it kind of feels like that's your win too, right? As a coach, as a team, we are validated by that. And that's okay. Like naturally we are because we're a part of this process. However, when we over highlight the win, when we celebrate it, when we put it on a pedestal, we miss an opportunity.
Mhm.
Because what we really want to do when someone creates success is not to say, high five, good job, let's keep going, let's blow right past it. Let's dissect it. What
Mhm.
was different this week that made that possible? What was it that shifted over the last 7 days that allowed for this to happen? And most importantly, how is this going to continue?
Yeah.
What needs to be anchored into you right now in this moment so that you can recognize this as a breakthrough so that we can use this to fuel you to keep you going? How can we recognize the pieces of this success that we can then mirror in future opportunities where we're in similar contexts or
Mhm.
faced with similar struggles, right? So over hyping the win, I mean, I'm not saying don't celebrate. Yes, celebrate, recognize, but don't celebrate and move on. Celebrate and sit in it.
Mhm.
Celebrate and pick it apart. Let's just not let it be a win because now we're training them that they're just progressing to hit wins, which are like little dopamine hits that are essentially external motivators to push them forward instead of allowing it to internalize and stoke that internal flame that's going to keep them going long after you're gone, right? So it's that very subtle shift from it being an external thing to making it an internal thing. Does that make sense?
It totally, and it actually gives very concrete meaning to something that PN, for example, teaches, or that the book Switch talks about. It's about finding the bright spots. And
Mm,
when you have a win, you have a bright spot right in front of you. And so often we are taught this, hey, virtual high five, let's go, instead of actually looking at, oh, there's something amazing that has happened. Let's go deeper into this and let's explore this.
mm.
Another part that was super interesting was how actually collecting data like weight or circumferences or pictures reinforces some of these difficult circles around obsessing with numbers. Can you explain this a little bit more?
Yes. Oh, I love this one. And I think collectively as an industry, we're starting to recognize and really buy into or trust in the fact that weight loss isn't the thing, right? Weight loss is an outcome, but there's a lot of other things going on that we are hoping to help our clients move through, like their obsession with the scale, like their reliance on external feedback in order to feel good, like their relationship with food, and all of these other internal emotional and psychological factors, right? When we ask our clients to, pardon me, report on their weight every single week, and in one breath and in the other breath trying to convince them that the number doesn't tell the whole story and
Mm.
that the scale is just a tool, we're giving them conflicting information because subconsciously when they're reporting on their weights every week or their measurements or even their macros, right, when they're reporting on this data every single week, it's being subconsciously programmed into them to believe that this is what matters the most.
Mhm.
She be asking me for this information every single week? And then when they come to you and they're feeling frustrated that their progress isn't as good as they expected or that they wanted or that they thought it should be, and we get frustrated because the number doesn't tell the whole story, it's like, okay, but you're reinforcing this belief in them.
Mhm.
So if you want to stand on the platform of the number doesn't tell the whole story, weight loss, the scale is just a number, it doesn't define you, etc., we either need to have a better pre-frame conversation about what that data represents or slash and we need to have a weekly conversation about what their physical progress really means so that they're not left to their own devices creating these stories about what it means, because they will. That's what our brain does. Our brain is a story maker. It creates stories about everything. It's how we attach meaning. And a
Mhm.
world without meaning it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist.
Scary
It happens
for most
entirely.
importantly, scary.
Right. Exactly. Like it's impossible. Even if you try not to, that in itself is creating meaning, right? It's funny. It's innate within us. So we have to recognize that very human innateness, and we have to be able to use it to our advantage to help our clients shift their thought processes around this scale. Um, I mean, ultimately, the third option is to not ask for that biometric data every single week and instead
Mhm.
ask for other
Mhm.
modalities of feedback instead that reinforce the emotional and the mental shifts that you're trying to create for them, getting them to a place of self trust instead of self judgment around their physical progress, which I'm sure we'll get into inside of the questions that I like to ask instead.
Yeah, I'm super interested actually in what questions you're actually going to ask, but there are two more things that I want to touch on first. One is
Yeah.
you talked about framing and pre-framing. So how do you introduce a check-in now with your new clients? So how can we make sure that they want to fill out these check-ins?
Yeah, great question, Robin. I think first, it's important for the coach to understand the intention behind it and the purpose behind it so that it's not just words you're saying, but there's no real meaning there for you. So I want you to understand the check in through my lens, the way that I like to treat it, is a tool for us to be able to create self trust with our client over their journey with us. It's
Mhm.
a way for them to become reflective. It's a way for them to have an opinion about what they're feeling, what they're thinking, and the results that they're seeing, and not being
Mm.
wrong inside of whatever that opinion is. And then bringing you two together as co creators in the journey instead of it just being you as the teacher, the fixer, the leader, and them just following along, right? We want to bring them into the conversation and have them have their opinion mean something and show them that it's safe to have an opinion. Because you have to realize, up until this point, the check in has just been a tool with every other coach they've worked with. And yes, they have absolutely worked with other coaches before you. It is
Mhm.
rare to find a client who hasn't, right? So they've experienced the check in before. So when we pre frame, we have to call that out. We have to bring that to the surface and say to them, I know you've done check ins before. How did they work for you in the past? What did you get out of them? And they're going to say, oh, I did it. I didn't do it. It was more so for my coach, da, 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 right? Beautiful. We want them to say that because we want to use that as ammunition to show them the contrast between their previous experience and what this is going to be like.
Mhm. Mhm.
So validate that. I know you felt that way. I used to feel that way. I've had clients that used to feel that way before I developed a better check in process. Here's how mine's different. When you check in with me, it's less so about you just reporting to me, and it's more so a conversation I'm inviting you to have with yourself. It's more so an opportunity for you to rebuild self trust that you lost years ago. I want you to learn how to look inside and ask yourself these questions so that when I'm long gone, you still have this as an anchor into who you're becoming and the path you're taking and who you're evolving into next. Okay, so simply by shifting it from a box to check into this deeper meaning that you're offering them, you're inviting them into, we get them to lean in. And that's all we're trying to do in this initial conversation. Instead of from them saying, I've done this before, which is their initial reaction, that's what their brain is going to tell them. I've seen this before, I've done this before. Yeah, whatever, it's a part of the process, it's monotonous, but I'll do it. We want them to connect the dots and then go, oh, she's different. Oh, this is going to feel different. Oh, this is going to challenge me in a different way. I'm going to have to look at things. That's a little scary, but I'm here for it. I feel supported by her, so let's do it. Right. And then what I like to do is pre frame the struggle around the check in as well, because there's going to be struggle, there's going to be resistance. When we ask deeper questions, it's not going to feel comfortable. I actually just did a live inside of my group like an hour ago on this exact thing. So this is so timely. Um, it's really tricky when a client resists our questions and we believe them to be so juicy and so delicious, we can't understand why people don't want to answer them. It's because they're getting triggered by them. It's because they
Mhm.
don't want to look at it, right? So let's just talk about that right at the very start. Hey, you may feel triggered sometimes. You might get emotional. These questions are intended to pull out of you what's really going on so that we can look at it together. That's okay if you feel triggered. It's okay if you get emotional. I'm expecting it. I want you to expect it. So when it happens, you don't think that you did something wrong. You don't fall into judgment of yourself. It's just an opportunity for us to connect. Robin, I'm just going to grab my power cord 1 second.
Yeah, sure. For those who are watching, I'm wondering, how does it feel just hearing this? Because when I listen to you and how you talk about this from this, oh, I have to go through another check and through another spreadsheet, to this actually really exciting. I am seeing another individual. I'm seeing what is going on through their life. And in a way, I also see part of myself that is often so interesting for me in coaching. Um, there's one part that we talked about way before we actually talked about this live, is the idea of, are all clients ready for this? Because I came to you and said, well, if we are thinking about a low ticket offer, for example, something where people maybe are paying $50 or $100 per month, sometimes they're not so invested into this. And so they're often not invested into going into this difficult conversations because they're triggered and they want to stay away from this. Am I right? Am I wrong? How do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, here's the way I like to think about it. It's very true that some clients aren't really ready for it, but I believe that we group those clients together too quickly. I believe that as coaches, we don't know how to have the conversation with them about it initially to make them ready for it, to invite them into it. They haven't been held through that journey before. They don't know what it entails. They don't know what it's going to be like. And when we don't know, we create fear around it. We create story around what it's going to be like and what it's going to mean. So for the coach, it's so crucial that you get clear around what that means for you. If you don't have a process to help someone through this, then I probably wouldn't promote that as a part of your service because it's just going to scare people away. You have to feel grounded in the way that you're working with people. And through that clarity for yourself, you can normalize it for them. You can make it feel safe for them. When someone doesn't feel ready, the subtext to that is just that they don't feel safe.
Mhm.
That's it. Everybody will be ready for that type of work if you make them feel safe inside of it. The reason why they don't feel ready is because it feels threatening. It's triggering things in them that they don't know what to do with. They're feeling all the things. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to put it. They don't know how to express it or talk about it or give it a word, even if you ask them what they're feeling. Lots of people can't even tell you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's so normal. So I think the coach needs to recognize first and foremost, where am I falling short in making people feel safe to have this
Mhm.
conversation? Do
Mhm.
I have language around this? Do I understand what I'm really trying to move people through? Do I have a process? Do I feel clear or do I need to spend some time and create that clarity for myself? And then once you have those two pieces, you're going to fall into situations less and less often where people actually aren't ready and recognize that it was just a clarity thing and it was a safety thing. And when we can connect those dots, everyone gets to be ready because everyone gets to meet us inside of that room and feel held by us in that way. Does that make sense?
It does. For me, it really reminds me of this idea. Can you leave a check-in conversation where the client has done absolutely nothing and they are not changing anything, and you leave the conversation and think, man, what a great productive conversation. That was for me one of the key insights. When I can leave a conversation with the client absolutely not changing at all, and I feel good about this, then I have this detachment from the outcome, and I'm in no way actually moving the client in any way to actually have to change. That for me is this idea of safety. You can tell me everything, you can tell me what all the things that are difficult, and you can still stay exactly the same without the need to change.
Oh, I love that perspective. That is so incredibly powerful because you're right. A lot of resistance with our clients comes from this place of, I have all this stuff, but I'm not ready to do anything with it. And if I talk about it out loud, she's going to make me do something with it, right? She's going to want to change something about it, and I'm just not there yet. So you're totally right. That is a nuance inside of this conversation that if you're sensing clients pulling back, if you're sensing that there's like a block there, and you will if you start to really tap into, okay, what is the energy I'm getting from this person? What are they saying? And then what are they not saying? I'm more interested in what people are not saying because it's what they're not saying that they're trying to protect. And by protecting these really vulnerable pieces of themselves, they're able to maintain a sense of familiarity, a sense of normalcy, and therefore a sense of internal safety. If you can create a sense of external state safety with you, you'll see people just naturally open up because they aren't feeling like they need to close themselves off to you in order to stay protected. They feel protected in your presence. And so naturally, they'll be able to release some of what it is that's really holding them back from change, whether or not you do anything with it. Right. So I love that piece of it. I think that that's so important to pull out. Thank you for that.
You're most welcome. We have a couple of questions, and one, of course, is so what questions are you actually asking in your check-in?
Right. Okay. Do we want to go through that now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let's do it. So I always preface this by saying the questions I ask, when you look at them on the surface, they look very simplistic and they appear very similar to ones you may be familiar with asking. But there are subtle nuances to how we're asking the questions that are really important to pick up on, and I'm gonna talk about those. If anybody wants them, you can just message me, and I'll just send you a PDF with them. So don't feel like you need to scribble notes down. You can just ask me for it, and I'll just send it to you. Okay. So my first question, I have them right here so I don't mess them up. So I say them verbatim. My first question is, how do you feel about what you accomplished in the last 7 days? What went well and where did you struggle? So the subtleties here isn't what did you accomplish in the last 7 days? It's how do you feel about what you accomplished in the last 7 days? Now we're opening up a conversation, not necessarily in them listing out everything that they accomplished. We want to know how they felt about whatever happened. It doesn't really matter what happened, right? I mean, it does kind of, but I'm way more interested in their emotional reaction to what happened. Are they falling into judgment? Are they falling into celebration? Are they falling into perceived sense of failure? Are they falling into comparison? Like, what's the emotional state we're entering this weekend? That's what I want to know here. Okay. Question number two is, what do you believe to be the obstacles you faced in accomplishing the goals we discussed last week? How did these obstacles challenge what you expected to happen? So let's break this into two parts. The first part, what do you believe to be the obstacles you faced? Believe is the key subtlety here. What do you believe to be the obstacles you faced is not the same as what obstacles did you face.
Mhm.
We're very subtly and subconsciously showing them that the obstacles that they think that they faced is actually just something that they created a story around to be an obstacle. Now
Mhm.
we have opportunity here to create conversation around that. Okay, they believe that going out with their friends on Friday night was an obstacle that they faced. Was it really an obstacle? Let's look at that through new lenses. Let's offer new perspectives. What could have been a different way we could have approached this, right? Like now we have dialogue that we can have instantly just by shifting how we're framing that question. The second piece to it is, how did these obstacles challenge what you expected to happen? Expectations, or rather failure to meet expectations,
Mhm.
is the number one reason why clients fall into disempowered states towards the end of the week. Everyone enters their week with these expectations, and then whether they meet them or not determines how their check-in comes through, right? So I want to know what they were expecting to happen. What were your expectations, and how did these obstacles affect or challenge you in meeting those expectations? This is a really potent question, right? Because very quickly we can see, oh, they were expecting to lose 3 pounds, and they think that by going out on Friday night is the reason why that didn't happen. But there's so much to unpack there. Like, no, that's not it at all. Like, you know what I mean? There's so many layers. So very instantly, instead of going, okay, what were your obstacles, and just leaving it at that, we have all of these little offshoots we can dig into that gets them looking at where they're actually falling into disempowering internal blocks more and more often, and how we can offer very subtle perspective shifts that can very easily offer them a breakthrough in one conversation. The third question is, what would a win look and feel like for you this week? And why would that be meaningful? So the first part, what would a win look and feel like? Again, we're pulling in that feeling. I
Mhm.
want to know what that win's going to feel like. I want to know viscerally and somatically in their body, what is that going to give them? I don't want to know, like, oh, a win would be 2 pounds off the scale. Dope. What's that going to feel like if that happens? What's that offering you? Beyond just the tangible, I want to go intrinsically. Where are we going with that? And then why is that meaningful? Cool, you lose 2 pounds. What does that mean to you? Where does that get you in your life? Where does that get us in this journey? What's that really taking us closer towards? This is inviting in a conversation around their deeper desire. We can really anchor in here and go, is that 2 pounds lost really going to affect this week your ability to show up and play with your kids, if that's their deeper desire or whatever? And then we can also invite in conversation around, what could you do this week, even if the 2 pounds isn't lost, that would get you closer to that deeper desire? What is it that this is really giving you, or you perceive this to be giving you? And how can we start to look at additional avenues to give that to yourself now, with or without those 2 pounds lost, right? We know it's never about the weight, right? It's always about something else.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
this invites in that opportunity. The fourth question is, from your perspective, their perspective, what do you believe you need to focus on this week in order to feel successful? So,
Mhm.
their perspective again, what do you need to focus on in order to feel successful? Not in order to be successful, not in order to hit that win. I want to know what you need to focus on to feel successful. Whether or not you hit those 2 pounds, how are you going to walk away from this week feeling that way? And then the last question is actually my favorite. It's a question nobody asks until you get these 5 questions from me. Um, from your perspective, how do you feel I can best support you this week? So simple, so basic, but we never ask it. We never ask it. And instead, we run around doing all this extra bullshit trying to prove our value to our clients, when really all they wanted was for you to keep being awesome. Like, like, I can't tell you how many times I get that. Just keep being yourself. Just keep being awesome. Just keep supporting me. Just keep doing what you're doing. Amazing. Now I don't feel all this extra pressure to chase them around all week, making sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, checking in unnecessarily, helicopter momming the shit out of them, right? So this is a question that I put in there to really just allow me to see, who do I need to support more this week? Who is asking me to show up for them in a bigger way?
Yeah.
And who just needs me to be in the background as that safety net, as that person that they can lean on if they need me, that I can kind of step back and take the reins and know that whatever happens, it's going to be okay. Right. So those are my 5 questions. There's a lot of subconscious triggers in there, but I think it's really potent when we can shift into incorporating some of those.
Yeah. What, what I love about the last question, I know many PN students are watching, and one of the questions that we asked when I was still an admin there was, so what have you asked the client? So they come up with, my client has this problem and I could do this, and this. What should I choose? And one of the questions we always ask was, have you asked the client? So I really love that you have this in there as well. And something that I really like to do with my clients is a mini feedback session at the end, asking, did you feel listened to? Or is there something that I didn't hear that you wanted to talk about? Or did we work towards your goals during the session? And this has the same impact, the same idea behind it. It gives them the opportunity to tell me, well, the session was good, but I wanted to talk about this, but you went in this direction. So I really, really love the perspective. We have a couple of comments and questions here, so I want to make sure that we cover them. We have one from Rosie. So I hear what you guys are saying about people not changing and being okay with that. I feel I get to that often with clients, but then often it will often flip later down the line that they have not been making progress. So how do you work through that? So Rosie, when I understand this correctly, you are more and more okay with clients not making progress, but then they flip this around and blaming you that they haven't made progress. Do you have a thought on this, Laura?
I interpreted that slightly differently. I thought she was asking, I mean, let's have dialogue about it. Whatever, Rosie, you can confirm, but my interpretation was you get the client to a place where they understand that it's not always about the physical progress, but then later on down the line, they start to freak out when they realize that physical progress isn't being made. So both are valid. We can speak into both. Initially where my head was going was that's so normal when clients are like, oh, I'm bought into the deeper journey. Yes, let's work on my mindset. Yes, let's heal my relationship with food and with myself. And they're into it. And then 2 months down the road, they're like, oh, damn, I'm up 2 pounds. I need to figure this out. Right. So a few things. One, that's very normal. You have to. So it's important to understand that our clients a lot of the time have been conditioned to base their progress on the physical. And even though you got initial buy-in around the intangible side of their journey, doesn't mean that that tape isn't still playing in the back of their mind, right? So I think it's just important to pre-frame that happening with the clients that you're working with on the internal. At some point, you're going to start to feel like physical progress should be faster. At some point, you may start to question whether this is really getting you where you want to go. How are we going to know at that point that this is what we need to be focusing on? They're in an empowered state when you're talking to them about the intangibles, about their internal journey, about their emotional journey. Let's anchor in at that point so that when they reach that destination and they're like, oh my God, I need to lose 10 pounds by tomorrow, you can remind them of that conversation. Okay, Rosie, remember, we talked about this about 3 weeks ago, how your mind's going to play tricks on you and it's going to make you want to like do something crazy, like cut out all the sugar or drop all your carbs or, go keto or something to try and force a physical change so that you can justify the investment you're making in this journey, or you can feel safe knowing that you're progressing. But how else are we progressing right now? Let's go back to that. What are we working on right now? Where's that really taking us? So having that anchor as a pre-frame before we start to get into that place can be very helpful to go back to when those moments happen. It's not about preventing those moments from happening. It's about pre-framing it before they happen so that we can just like build that bridge and keep walking back and forth across it until they get to a place where they're like, okay, I'm safe. This is okay.
Yeah. This really reminds me of the Headspace app, how it has this SOS meditations. And this reminds me this like, oh my God, I want to lose so much weight. And then I'm reaching out to Laura and then I have this SOS meditation reminding me, oh, okay, yeah, physical progress will come and I have to trust the process. And I think, especially as coaches, it's sometimes difficult if we haven't made this journey ourselves, because I remember trying for 6 months to lose weight, and there were dozens and dozens of things that my head has to I had to wrap my head around first. And then suddenly, okay, the next day I was able to don't buy the protein chocolate pudding 3 times a day and actually leave this. So I think this is something else that comes up when we don't have this experience, that a lot inside of our head or in our body has to change first before we can make this external change.
I love that, because you hit on something really important, Robin. As the coach, if you don't trust that doing that internal work with your client is going to lead to the external result, if you're in doubt of that, if you don't fully believe it, then that energy is going to circulate inside of that relationship. Your mistrust, your edginess, your uneasiness is going to be felt by your client, right? So it is really key that if you don't trust that the work you're doing internally is going to lead them where they're supposed to go, what needs to happen there? Do you need to deepen your skill set in order to create a deeper change in them? Or do you need to work on your own internal interpretation and your own internal expectations of what this is going to give them? Sorry, my throat.
So, and I think this is something that we briefly talked about during the panel conversation. And Christy Miller said this: it is very difficult for coaches to realize, but sometimes we are not their last coach. It sometimes takes maybe another and another coach to actually get them to the place they want, not because we are not good enough, but because they had to make some new experiences and new decisions to actually reach a certain point. I want to make sure that everyone can learn as much as possible from this. You mentioned you had a similar conversation in your Facebook group.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about your Facebook group and what coaches can learn there from you?
Yeah, so my Facebook group is actually a private group for my trigger mapping students. So inside of that group, I do weekly lives with my head coach, Kelly. And today was a live all about check-ins. I had a question from one of my students around their clients were just not doing their check-ins. They're doing the pre-framing thing. They have my check-in form and they're just not filling it out. And so I sensed a lot of frustration, a lot of anger coming up inside of, why are they not doing what I asked them to do? Right? Which is it's so normal as a coach. We often get triggered when clients don't do the thing, even though they said they would do the thing, right? So we were talking a lot in that group today about how when we get triggered by a client, whether it's through the check-in or otherwise, that's such a great opportunity for us to actually look at, okay, what about this is making me feel uncomfortable? What am I making this mean about me? And what am I really relying on my client to give me that I should be giving myself? So what we unearthed was really that a lot of the time with the check-in specifically, we rely on it in order, as I said at the start, to feel comfortable entering into that conversation. And when we don't have it, we feel threatened because we don't necessarily feel like we know what to do when we get on the call with them if we don't have this information ahead of time. So the work inside of getting triggered with our clients is ultimately look internally first at ourselves. What's coming up for us? What would I need to believe about myself or about the situation in order for me to be getting triggered in this way? And where's the opportunity for me to start to look at this differently so that I'm not making my internal stuff about the client, and we can allow both to exist in the same room, but I'm not impacting the way I'm coaching simply because I'm feeling uncomfortable. So I think this is such an important aspect to the whole check-in thing, because it doesn't matter if you pre-frame and you have all the beautiful questions and you remind them to fill it out and blah, blah, blah. Some people are just not going to. Some people are just not going to. And then when you get triggered by that, that's a great opportunity to look inwards. But yeah, Robin, to your question, My group is for my trigger mapping program. It's private for my students, and we pop up in there and do trainings like this each week. And today just happened to be the check-in one.
And but I want to make sure that people can find you and learn more about you. What is the best place to get in contact with you?
Beautiful question. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm mostly on Instagram. Robin pulls me onto Facebook sometimes, and it always makes me think like I gotta get back on Facebook more. So if you message me on Facebook, I do check that inbox. You will absolutely reach me. But I'm on Instagram all the time. So if you're on Instagram, you can just search my name at Laura Pobrin. I'll pop right up, and you can send me a message. I also have all my free trainings on there. I have my website, laurapobrin.com, and I'm in the process of putting up all my free workshops on that site. So there should be in the next couple of months a whole schwack of them for you to download and dig into. The check-in workshop that you mentioned at the start, Robin, will be up there as well for people to download, where we go deep into all of this for about an hour and a half. It's a good one. I highly recommend it. So that would be a great
It's
place.
really great.
Thanks, Robin. I appreciate it. Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you.
So for everyone who is maybe watching the recording, all the links are in the description box as well. And if you have been following my channel, you have seen Laura multiple times, and I continue to highly recommend checking her out. If it comes to really flipping the script of many of the things that are holding us back as coaches, because we're getting these things taught by the gurus, by who's supposed to know all of this, then Laura really is the person who gets you to think deeper, not only about your clients, but also about yourself and how you show up as a coach. So I highly recommend checking her out. You will always learn something really incredible.
You're such a gem. Thank you, Robin. I always love talking with you. It's always so effortless. I feel like we could just talk for hours. So I appreciate you holding the space for us. It was amazing.